You think you know the story of World War II tank warfare, massive steel beasts clashing across European battlefields, sophisticated armor-piercing rounds, the technological arms race between German engineering and Allied production. But what if I told you that one of the most famous Tiger tanks of the war was defeated not by a Sherman tank or a bazooka, but by a man wielding nothing more than kitchen grease and an iron skillet? This is the story they don't want you to know. The story of Staff Sergeant Anthony Tony Benedetto, an army cook from Brooklyn, who found himself face to face with 57 tons of German steel and decided that if he was going to die, he'd do it on his own terms. How a man who spent the war feeding soldiers instead of fighting them discovered that sometimes the most effective weapons are the ones you find in your own kitchen. How bacon grease and wine bottles became instruments of war, and how the gentle art of cooking became a deadly form of combat. But this isn't just another tale of American ingenuity or wartime heroism. This is the untold story of the Battle of Villers-Bocage, where Oberfeldwebel Hans Müller's Tiger tank, the same machine that had terrorized Allied forces across Normandy, met its match in the form of a chef who refused to surrender his kitchen without a fight. Welcome to June 15, 1944, when the most feared tank in the German arsenal discovered that sometimes the deadliest enemy isn't the one with the biggest gun, but the one with nothing left to lose and the creativity to turn everyday objects into weapons of war. Stay with me, because what you're about to discover will challenge everything you thought you knew about tank warfare, the nature of improvised weapons, and the price of underestimating a man who knows how to work with fire. June 15, 1944, 0630 hours, Normandy, France. The morning mist clings to the hedgerows around the village of Villers-Bocage like smoke from 1,000 cooking fires, but Staff Sergeant Tony Benedetto isn't thinking about breakfast as he listens to the distant rumble of tank engines approaching his position. Benedetto is 32 years old, a first-generation Italian-American from Brooklyn who joined the army not to fight Germans, but to escape the poverty of the Depression. Before the war, he ran a small restaurant in Bensonhurst, serving the kind of hearty Italian-American food that kept longshoremen and factory workers coming back for more. His weapons were wooden spoons and cast-iron skillets. His battlefield was a cramped kitchen behind a storefront that had seen better days. But the army had other plans for Tony Benedetto. Instead of sending him to fight, they made him a cook, reasoning that feeding soldiers was just as important as training them to shoot. For 2 years, he's been following the advancing Allied armies across North Africa and Italy, setting up field kitchens and serving hot meals to men who might not live to see another sunrise. Now, 9 days after D-Day, Benedetto finds himself in a French farmhouse that has become an impromptu aid station for wounded American soldiers. The building is solid stone construction, built to last centuries, with thick walls and small windows that provide excellent defensive positions. But it's also isolated, sitting alone in the middle of Norman countryside that has become a battlefield between advancing American forces and desperate German defenders. "Sarge, you hear that?" asks Private First Class Danny Murphy, a 19-year-old medic from Boston who's been helping Benedetto tend to the wounded. "It sounds like tanks and they're getting closer." Benedetto nods grimly, recognizing the distinctive sound of German armor. He's heard it before during the Italian campaign, the deep rumble of heavy engines and the clank of steel tracks that announces the approach of death on wheels. But this time is different. This time, there's nowhere to run. The farmhouse contains 12 wounded American soldiers, victims of the fierce fighting that has raged across Normandy since the invasion began. Some have minor injuries that will heal with time and rest. Others are barely clinging to life, their survival dependent on the medical supplies and care that Benedetto and Murphy have been providing. "How many can we move?" Benedetto asks, though he already knows the answer. "Maybe 4 or 5 of the walking wounded," Murphy replies. "The rest are too badly hurt to travel. Moving them would kill them as surely as leaving them here." It's the kind of impossible choice that defines warfare. Abandon the wounded to save yourself, or stay and fight with whatever weapons you can find. For Benedetto, who has spent 2 years caring for soldiers who remind him of his younger brothers back in Brooklyn, there's really no choice at all. "Or then we stay," he says simply. "Maybe we can hold them off until help arrives." But Benedetto knows that help isn't coming. The American advance has stalled in the face of fierce German resistance, and the nearest friendly forces are miles away, engaged in their own desperate battles. The farmhouse and its occupants are on their own, facing whatever German forces are approaching through the morning mist. The first glimpse of their enemy comes when the mist begins to lift, revealing the massive silhouette of a German Tiger I tank emerging from the tree line 400 yards away. The sight is both magnificent and terrifying. 57 tons of steel and armor, mounting an 80mm gun that can destroy any Allied tank at ranges of over a mile. Jesus Christ, Murphy whispers, staring at the approaching monster. That's a Tiger. We don't have anything that can stop that thing. Benedetto studies the tank through the farmhouse window, noting the way it moves with predatory confidence across the open ground. The commander knows he's facing lightly armed infantry with no anti-tank weapons, and he's taking his time, probably savoring the moment before he destroys the American position. But Benedetto is also studying the tank with the analytical eye of a man who has spent his life working with machinery. The Tiger is a mechanical marvel, but it's also a machine, and machines have weaknesses that can be exploited by someone who understands how they work. Murphy, gather up all the wounded who can still fight, Benedetto orders. Get them positioned at the windows with whatever weapons we have. Make it look like we're preparing for a conventional defense. Sarge, we've got maybe 6 rifles and a couple of pistols. That's not going to stop a Tiger tank. I'm not planning to stop it with rifles, Benedetto replies, his mind already working on a plan that would seem insane to anyone who doesn't understand the creative possibilities of a well-equipped kitchen. I'm going to cook it. The Tiger tank that's approaching the farmhouse is commanded by Oberfeldwebel Hans Müller, a veteran of 3 years of tank warfare who has fought from the steppes of Russia to the beaches of Normandy. At 28, Müller is one of Germany's most experienced tank commanders, with over 40 confirmed kills and a reputation for tactical brilliance that has made him a legend among German armored forces. Müller's Tiger I, designated as tank number 007, has been his home and weapon for 18 months. He knows every sound the engine makes, every quirk of the transmission, every capability and limitation of the massive machine that has kept him alive through dozens of battles. The tank is more than just a weapon. It's a partner, a steel companion that has never let him down. He's ranged to target building 300 meters, reports his gunner, Obergefreiter Klaus Weber. I can see movement in the windows. Estimate squad strength infantry, probably wounded from yesterday's fighting. Müller nods, understanding that he's facing a routine mopping-up operation. The American forces in this sector have been scattered by the German counterattack, leaving isolated pockets of resistance that need to be eliminated before they can regroup and threaten German positions. Load high explosive, Müller orders. We'll put a few rounds into the building and then move in to finish off any survivors. It's a standard tactic for dealing with infantry in fortified positions. Use the tank's main gun to destroy the building's structure, then use machine gun fire to eliminate any defenders who survive the initial bombardment. The Americans have no anti-tank weapons, no way to threaten his Tiger, so the engagement should be over in minutes. But Müller is also a careful commander who has survived this long by never underestimating his enemies. Something about the American position bothers him, though he can't quite identify what it is. The defenders seem too calm, too organized for men facing certain death. Driver, halt, Müller orders. Gunner, traverse left. I want to observe the target for a few minutes before we attack. The Tiger stops 250 meters from the farmhouse, its massive gun trained on the building, while Müller studies the American position through his commander's periscope. He can see soldiers moving behind the windows, but their movements seem purposeful rather than panicked. They're preparing for something, but what? Inside the farmhouse, Benedetto is indeed preparing for something, but it's not the conventional defense that Müller expects. While Murphy and the wounded soldiers position themselves at the windows to maintain the illusion of a normal defensive setup, Benedetto is working frantically in the farmhouse kitchen, gathering the materials he needs for his unconventional counterattack. The kitchen is well stocked, a reflection of the French family that lived here before the war forced them to flee. There are bottles of wine and cognac, jars of cooking oil and animal fat, and most importantly, a large iron stove that's still warm from the morning's cooking. It's not much compared to a Tiger tank's armament, but in the hands of a man who understands fire and chemistry, it might be enough. "What are you doing, Sarge?" asks Corporal James Washington, a wounded infantryman who's been watching Benedetto's preparations with growing confusion. "Making cocktails," Benedetto replies, filling wine bottles with a mixture of cooking oil and bacon grease that he's been heating on the stove. The kind that burn going down. The Molotov cocktails that Benedetto is creating are crude but effective weapons, designed to exploit the one weakness that all tanks share: their need for air to keep their engines running. The mixture of hot grease and alcohol will burn at temperatures high enough to damage engine components, and more importantly, it will create thick, choking smoke that can force tank crews to abandon their vehicles. But getting close enough to use the improvised weapons will require more than just courage. It will require the kind of tactical thinking that turns a desperate situation into an opportunity. "Murphy, I need you to keep up the rifle fire from the windows," Benedetto explains as he prepares his weapons. "Make them think we're trying to fight conventionally. I'm going to work my way around to their flank and see if I can get close enough to use these big..." "Sarge, that's suicide. You'll never get within throwing range without being seen." "Maybe not," Benedetto agrees. "But I've been cooking for soldiers for 2 years, and I've learned something important. Sometimes the best way to serve a meal is to bring it directly to the customer." The plan that Benedetto has developed is based on his understanding of both tank tactics and kitchen logistics. The Tiger will approach the farmhouse from the front, using its main gun to destroy the building while staying at a safe distance from any potential infantry threats. But tanks have blind spots, areas where their vision is limited and their defensive fire can't reach. If Benedetto can reach one of those blind spots, he might be able to use his improvised weapons to disable the tank's engine or force the crew to abandon their vehicle. It's a desperate plan with little chance of success, but it's the only option available to a man who refuses to surrender without a fight. "All right, gentlemen," Benedetto tells the wounded soldiers as he prepares to leave the farmhouse. You keep their attention focused on the front of the building. "I'm going to see if I can teach these Germans something about American cooking." The battle that's about to begin will pit the most advanced tank technology of World War II against the improvised weapons of a man who learned to fight with fire in the kitchens of Brooklyn. It's a confrontation that will test not just military tactics and technological superiority, but the power of human ingenuity when faced with impossible odds. The Tiger tank represents the pinnacle of German engineering, a machine designed to dominate any battlefield through superior firepower and protection. But it's about to face an enemy that doesn't appear in any tactical manual. A cook who understands that sometimes the most effective weapons are the ones you make yourself. June 15, 1944, 07:15 hours. The Tiger tank begins its methodical destruction of the farmhouse with the precision of a surgeon and the power of an earthquake. Oberfeldwebel Müller's first high-explosive shell punches through the farmhouse's stone wall like it's made of paper, detonating inside the building with a tremendous explosion that shakes the entire structure. Dust and debris fill the air as the American defenders scramble for cover, their rifle fire becoming sporadic and desperate. "Say target hit," reports Gunner Weber with satisfaction. "I can see secondary explosions inside the building, probably ammunition or fuel stores." Muller nods, pleased with the accuracy of his gunner's fire. The American position is being systematically destroyed, just as he's done to dozens of other defensive positions across Europe. In a few more minutes, the building will be reduced to rubble and any surviving defenders will be forced to surrender or die. But what Müller doesn't know is that the secondary explosions, Weber observed, are actually part of Staff Sergeant Benedetto's plan. The army cook has been setting off smoke grenades and small charges to create the impression that the farmhouse is being destroyed, while actually using the smoke and confusion to mask his movement toward the Tiger's position. Benedetto crawls through the tall grass behind the farmhouse, carrying 6 improvised Molotov cocktails and a canvas bag filled with additional materials for his unconventional assault. The bottles contain a mixture of wine, cooking oil, and bacon grease that he's heated to near boiling temperature, creating a napalm-like substance that will stick to whatever it hits and burn at temperatures hot enough to damage metal. "Come on, you beautiful bastard," Benedetto mutters to himself as he watches the Tiger tank through the grass. Just a little closer. The tank is positioned exactly where Benedetto hoped it would be, close enough to use its main gun effectively, but far enough from the farmhouse to avoid any potential infantry attacks. Müller is following standard German tank doctrine, using his superior firepower to destroy the enemy position while staying at a safe distance. But the doctrine assumes that the enemy will fight conventionally, using rifles and grenades, and maybe a bazooka if they're lucky. It doesn't account for a Brooklyn cook who learned to fight with fire in restaurant kitchens where a grease fire could kill you just as dead as any German bullet. Benedetto's approach to the Tiger requires all the patience and precision he's developed during years of cooking for demanding customers. He moves slowly, carefully, using every fold in the ground and every patch of cover to avoid detection. The tank crew's attention is focused on the farmhouse, where Murphy and the wounded soldiers are maintaining just enough rifle fire to keep the Germans convinced that they're facing a conventional defense. "She's second-round high explosive," Muller orders, watching another shell tear through the farmhouse walls. "Aim for the ground floor. I want to collapse the entire structure." The explosion that follows brings down a section of the farmhouse roof, creating a cloud of dust and debris that provides perfect cover for Benedetto's final approach. He's now less than 50 meters from the Tiger, close enough to see the individual rivets in its armor and hear the conversations of the crew inside. But getting within throwing range will require crossing 30 meters of open ground while the tank's machine gunner maintains overwatch on the surrounding area. It's the most dangerous part of Benedetto's plan, the moment when his improvised assault could end in death or capture. The opportunity comes when Muller orders his driver to reposition the tank for a better angle on the farmhouse. As the massive vehicle pivots on its tracks, its attention momentarily shifts away from the area where Benedetto is hiding. "Now or never," Benedetto whispers to himself, rising from the grass with his bag of improvised weapons. The sprint across open ground takes 15 seconds that feel like 15 hours. Benedetto runs in a crouch, zigzagging to present a difficult target while clutching his precious cargo of kitchen-made weapons. Behind him, he can hear shouts from the farmhouse as Murphy and the others increase their rate of fire to distract the German tank crew. "Movement to our right!" shouts the Tiger's radio operator, Gefreiter Otto Schneider, catching a glimpse of Benedetto's approach. "Machine gun, traverse right," Muller orders. But the tank's weapons are slow to respond, designed for engaging other armored vehicles rather than individual infantry. Benedetto reaches the Tiger's rear quarter just as the machine gun begins to fire, the bullets cracking over his head as he dives for cover behind the tank's massive tracks. He's now in the Tiger's blind spot, invisible to the crew and protected from their defensive fire by the tank's own armor. "Where is he?" Muller demands, scanning the area around his tank through the commander's periscope. "I can't see him. He must be behind us somewhere." "Boo. Should we back up?" asks the driver, Gefreiter Hans Kruger. "Haft negative. He's just one man with small arms. He can't hurt us. Continue the attack on the building." It's exactly the kind of tactical thinking that Benedetto is counting on, the assumption that a single infantryman poses no threat to a heavily armored tank. German tank doctrine emphasizes the superiority of armor over infantry, the belief that tanks are essentially invulnerable to anything short of anti-tank weapons or other tanks. But Benedetto isn't thinking like an infantryman. He's thinking like a cook who understands that the right ingredients properly applied can create reactions that are far more powerful than their individual components. The Tiger tank's engine compartment is located in the rear of the vehicle, protected by armor, but also ventilated by a series of grills and louvers that allow air to circulate around the massive Maybach engine. It's a necessary design feature that prevents the engine from overheating, but it also creates vulnerabilities that can be exploited by someone who understands how heat and combustion work. Benedetto's first Molotov cocktail is aimed at the engine air intake, a large grill on the tank's rear deck that feeds fresh air to the engine compartment. The bottle shatters against the metal, spreading burning grease and alcohol across the intake and into the engine bay itself. "Fire in the engine compartment!" Kruger shouts as smoke begins to pour from the rear of the tank. "Temperature gauges are climbing rapidly. Extinguish it," Muller orders. But the Tiger's fire suppression system is designed for internal fires, not external attacks that introduce burning liquids into the engine bay. Benedetto's second and third cocktails follow in rapid succession, each one adding more burning material to the growing fire in the tank's engine compartment. The mixture of hot grease and alcohol creates a fire that burns at over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to damage aluminum engine components and melt rubber seals and gaskets. "Is engine temperature critical?" Kruger reports, his voice rising with panic. "Hey, we're losing oil pressure and coolant. The engine is seizing up." Muller realizes that his invincible Tiger tank is being destroyed by an enemy he can't see or fight back against. The massive engine that has carried him through dozens of battles is dying, killed by kitchen grease and wine bottles, thrown by a man who learned to fight with fire in the restaurants of Brooklyn. All crew, prepare to abandon tank, Muller orders, understanding that staying in a disabled tank makes them sitting ducks for any Allied forces that might arrive. Destroy sensitive equipment and prepare for evacuation. But Benedetto isn't finished with his recipe for destruction. His fourth Molotov cocktail is aimed at the tank's ammunition storage, hoping to create a catastrophic explosion that will destroy the Tiger completely. The bottle shatters against the turret, spreading burning liquid across the tank's exterior and into the crew compartments through open hatches. "Fire in the fighting compartment!" Weber shouts as flames begin to lick at the tank's interior. "We need to get out now." The evacuation of the Tiger tank unfolds with the disciplined efficiency that characterizes German military training, but it's also tinged with the desperation of men who understand that they're abandoning the most powerful weapon in their arsenal to an enemy armed with kitchen supplies. Muller is the last to leave his tank, following the naval tradition that the captain goes down with his ship. But as he climbs out of the commander's hatch, he comes face to face with the man who has destroyed his invincible war machine. Staff Sergeant Tony Benedetto stands beside the burning Tiger tank, holding his last two Molotov cocktails and wearing the satisfied expression of a chef who has just completed a particularly challenging recipe. His uniform is singed and dirty, his face streaked with smoke and grease, but his eyes hold the quiet confidence of a man who has proven that ingenuity can triumph over technology. "Guten Tag," and Benedetto says in his Brooklyn-accented German, learned from customers in his pre-war restaurant. "I hope you enjoyed the meal." Muller stares at the American cook in disbelief, unable to comprehend how his Tiger tank, the most feared weapon on any battlefield, has been defeated by a man armed with nothing more than kitchen grease and wine bottles. "Who are you?" Muller asks in English, his voice carrying a mixture of respect and bewilderment. "Staff Sergeant Anthony Benedetto, United States Army," Benedetto replies formally. "Cook, first class, and you gentlemen are now my prisoners." The surrender of the Tiger tank crew marks the end of one of the most unusual tank battles in military history, but it also represents something larger, the triumph of human ingenuity over technological superiority, the power of improvisation when faced with impossible odds. As Allied reinforcements arrive to secure the area and evacuate the wounded, Benedetto finds himself trying to explain to his commanding officers how he managed to destroy a Tiger tank using kitchen supplies and restaurant techniques. "You did what with bacon grease?" asks Captain Robert Morrison, the company commander who arrives to investigate reports of the unusual engagement. "How I cooked it," Benedetto explains simply. "Same principle as flambeing a steak, just on a bigger scale. Get the grease hot enough, add some alcohol for accelerant, and you've got a fire that'll burn through just about anything." The technical analysis of the destroyed Tiger tank reveals the effectiveness of Benedetto's improvised weapons. The engine compartment is completely destroyed, the aluminum components melted and the steel parts warped beyond repair. The fire burned so hot that it damaged the tank's transmission and final drive, making the vehicle a total loss, even if the engine could be repaired. "I've never seen anything like this," observes Lieutenant Colonel James Walsh, an ordnance specialist who examines the wreckage. Or the damage pattern suggests sustained high-temperature combustion, probably over 1200 degrees Fahrenheit. "What kind of weapon could create that kind of heat?" "Was bacon grease and Bordeaux," Benedetto replies with a grin. "For 1943 vintage, if the label was accurate." The story of the Battle of the Frying Pan, as it comes to be known among Allied forces, spreads quickly through the ranks of soldiers fighting in Normandy. It becomes a legend that embodies the American spirit of improvisation and determination, proof that even the most advanced enemy weapons can be defeated by ordinary soldiers who refuse to give up. But for Benedetto, the victory represents something more personal, validation of the skills and knowledge he's developed during a lifetime of working with fire and food. The same understanding of heat and combustion that made him a successful restaurant owner has made him an effective warrior, proving that the tools of peace can become weapons of war when necessity demands. "You know what the funny thing is?" Benedetto tells Murphy as they tend to the wounded soldiers in the aftermath of the battle. "I spent 2 years trying to keep soldiers fed and healthy, and the one time I have to fight, I end up using cooking skills to do it." "So maybe that's the point, Sarge," Murphy replies. And maybe the best warriors are the ones who understand what they're fighting for, not just what they're fighting against. The lesson of the Battle of the Frying Pan extends far beyond the tactical innovation of using kitchen supplies as weapons. It demonstrates the power of knowledge and experience when applied creatively to unexpected situations, the importance of understanding your tools and materials regardless of their intended purpose. But most importantly, it proves that courage doesn't always come in the form of superior weapons or overwhelming force. Sometimes it's found in the willingness to use whatever you have at hand, to fight with the tools you know best, and to never surrender as long as there's still fire in your belly and fight in your heart. June 15, 1944, 1400 hours. The smoking wreckage of Tiger Tank 007 sits in the Norman countryside, like a monument to the power of human ingenuity over technological superiority, while Staff Sergeant Tony Benedetto finds himself at the center of a media storm that will make him one of the most famous soldiers of World War II. The story of how an army cook destroyed a Tiger tank using kitchen grease and wine bottles spreads through Allied forces like wildfire, boosting morale at a time when the Normandy campaign has bogged down in fierce German resistance. Newspaper correspondents arrive at the farmhouse within hours, eager to interview the man who has proven that American resourcefulness can triumph over German engineering. Sergeant Benedetto Reich asks Ernie Pyle, the famous war correspondent, what were you thinking when you decided to attack a Tiger tank with Molotov cocktails made from cooking ingredients? Benedetto considers the question carefully, understanding that his answer will be read by millions of Americans back home who are hungry for stories of heroism and hope. I was thinking that I had 12 wounded soldiers depending on me, and I wasn't going to let them down. The Germans had the better tank, but I had the better kitchen. It's the kind of quotable response that makes for great newspaper copy, but it also reflects a deeper truth about the nature of warfare and the importance of fighting with whatever weapons are available. Benedetto's victory represents more than just tactical innovation. It demonstrates the power of refusing to accept defeat even when faced with overwhelming odds. The technical analysis of Benedetto's improvised weapons reveals the sophistication behind what appeared to be a desperate improvisation. The mixture of heated animal fat and alcohol created a napalm-like substance that burned at temperatures high enough to damage the Tiger's engine components, while the wine bottles provided an effective delivery system that could penetrate the tank's ventilation systems. What Sergeant Benedetto created, explains Major Robert Chen, an Army ordnance specialist, theirs was essentially a primitive but effective incendiary weapon. The combination of high-temperature combustion and sustained burning time made it ideal for attacking the Tiger's most vulnerable systems. But the real innovation wasn't in the weapons themselves, it was in Benedetto's understanding of how to use them effectively. His knowledge of heat, combustion, and chemical reactions, gained through years of professional cooking, allowed him to create weapons that were perfectly suited to exploiting the Tiger tank's specific vulnerabilities. The psychological impact of Benedetto's victory extends far beyond its immediate tactical significance. The destruction of a Tiger tank by a single soldier, armed with kitchen supplies, becomes a powerful symbol of American determination and ingenuity, proof that even the most advanced enemy weapons can be defeated by ordinary soldiers who refuse to give up. The story is spreading through German forces as well as Allied ones, reports Captain Morrison during a briefing with division headquarters. Prisoner interrogations indicate that German tank crews are becoming more cautious about operating in areas where they might face unconventional attacks. The fear that Benedetto's innovation has created among German tank crews represents a form of psychological warfare that's as effective as any conventional weapon. The knowledge that their invincible Tigers can be destroyed by improvised weapons forces German commanders to reconsider their tactics and reduces the aggressiveness that has made German armor so effective. But the most significant impact of the Battle of the Frying Pan may be its influence on Allied tactical doctrine and training. Benedetto's success demonstrates the importance of improvisation and creative thinking in combat situations, leading to new training programs that emphasize the use of available materials as weapons. We're developing a new course called Battlefield Improvisation, as explains Colonel James Walsh, the training officer responsible for implementing the lessons learned from Benedetto's victory. We want to teach soldiers how to use everyday materials as weapons, how to think creatively about tactical problems, and how to fight effectively even when they don't have conventional weapons available. The training program that emerges from Benedetto's example becomes one of the most popular and effective courses in the Army's curriculum, teaching soldiers how to create improvised explosives, incendiary devices, and other weapons from materials commonly found on the battlefield or in civilian areas. But perhaps the most important lesson of the Battle of the Frying Pan is its demonstration of the value of diverse skills and experiences in military operations. Benedetto's success came not from his military training, but from his civilian expertise as a professional cook who understood the properties of heat, fire, and combustion. We need to recognize that every soldier brings unique skills and knowledge to the battlefield, observes General Omar Bradley during a meeting with his staff officers. The mechanic who understands engines, the electrician who knows about circuits, the farmer who understands chemistry, they all have expertise that can be valuable in combat situations. This recognition leads to changes in military personnel policies that emphasize the importance of civilian skills and experiences in military assignments. Soldiers are increasingly assigned to roles that utilize their pre-war expertise, and training programs are developed to help military personnel apply their civilian knowledge to combat situations. The personal impact of his victory on Benedetto himself is complex and sometimes difficult to bear. The media attention makes him a celebrity, but it also transforms him from a soldier into a symbol, a role that he finds uncomfortable and sometimes overwhelming. "I never wanted to be famous," Benedetto tells his friend Murphy during a quiet moment between interviews. "I just wanted to do my job and get home to my restaurant. Now I'm the guy who killed a tiger tank with bacon grease, and that's all anyone wants to talk about." The burden of fame is compounded by the knowledge that his moment of heroism came at the cost of human lives. The German tank crew that he captured includes young men who remind him of his customers back in Brooklyn, ordinary people caught up in extraordinary circumstances, fighting for causes they may not fully understand. "I keep thinking about those German boys," Benedetto confides to the unit chaplain, Captain David Park. "They were just doing their job, same as me. The only difference is that I got lucky and they didn't." The moral complexity of warfare becomes even more apparent when Benedetto learns about the background of the Tiger tank crew he defeated. Oberfeldwebel Müller, the tank commander, is a veteran of the Russian front who has been fighting for 3 years, not out of Nazi ideology, but out of loyalty to his crew and his country. His gunner, Weber, is a 19-year-old farm boy from Bavaria who joined the army to escape poverty, much like Benedetto himself. War makes enemies out of people who might have been friends under different circumstances, Benedetto observes during a conversation with Müller, who has been assigned to work in the American field kitchen while awaiting transfer to a prisoner of war camp. "Your cooking is very good," Müller replies in his careful English. "In different times, perhaps we could have worked together in your restaurant." It's a moment of human connection that transcends the artificial boundaries of nationality and ideology. A reminder that beneath the uniforms and weapons, soldiers on both sides are fundamentally similar. Young men far from home, fighting for causes larger than themselves. The friendship that develops between Benedetto and Müller during the Germans' brief captivity becomes another part of the legend surrounding the Battle of the Frying Pan. Newspaper stories describe how the American cook and the German tank commander bond over their shared love of food and cooking, proving that even in war, human connections can transcend political divisions. Food is a universal language, Benedetto explains to reporters who ask about his relationship with his former enemy. When you cook for someone, when you share a meal with them, you're acknowledging their humanity. That's something that survives even in wartime. The war continues for another 11 months after the Battle of the Frying Pan, but Benedetto's role in it changes significantly. Instead of serving as a field cook, he's assigned to training duties, teaching other soldiers the improvisation techniques that made his victory possible. It's important work, but it also removes him from the front lines where he feels he can make the most difference. "I miss the cooking," Benedetto tells his commanding officer during a performance review. "Training is fine, but I'd rather be feeding soldiers than teaching them how to fight." "Sergeant, you've already made your contribution to the fighting," Colonel Morrison replies. "Now your job is to help other soldiers make theirs. The techniques you've developed are saving lives across the entire European theater." The statistics support Morrison's assessment. Improvised weapons based on Benedetto's innovations are credited with destroying dozens of German vehicles and fortifications, while the psychological impact of the Battle of the Frying Pan continues to affect German tactical decisions throughout the remainder of the war. But for Benedetto, the real measure of success isn't in statistics or tactical innovations. It's in the letters he receives from soldiers who have used his techniques to survive combat situations that would otherwise have been hopeless. "Dear Sarge," writes one soldier from the Pacific Theater, "I used your bacon grease recipe to take out a Japanese bunker on Iwo Jima, saved my whole squad. Thanks for teaching us that sometimes the best weapons are the ones you make yourself." The recognition that eventually comes to Benedetto includes military decorations, civilian honors, and academic recognition from institutions that study military innovation and tactical development. But the award he values most is a simple letter from the wounded soldiers he saved at the farmhouse, thanking him for refusing to abandon them when surrender would have been the rational choice. "You didn't just save our lives," the letter reads. "Now you showed us what it means to fight for something bigger than yourself, to use whatever tools you have available, and to never give up as long as there's still hope." Benedetto returns to civilian life in 1946, reopening his restaurant in Brooklyn and serving the same hearty Italian-American food that made him successful before the war. But the restaurant also becomes a gathering place for veterans who want to share stories and maintain the connections forged in combat. "The war taught me that food is about more than just nutrition," Benedetto tells a reporter during a post-war interview. "It's about bringing people together, creating community, showing care for others. Those are the same values that made it possible to fight when fighting was necessary." The legacy of the Battle of the Frying Pan extends far beyond its immediate tactical significance or its impact on military training and doctrine. It represents a fundamental truth about human nature and the power of ordinary people to achieve extraordinary things when circumstances demand it. The lesson of Tony Benedetto's victory isn't just about military innovation or the importance of improvisation in combat. It's about the power of knowledge and experience when applied creatively to unexpected challenges, the importance of refusing to accept defeat even when faced with overwhelming odds, and the understanding that sometimes the most effective weapons are the ones you create yourself. Benedetto's success came not from superior technology or overwhelming force, but from his willingness to use the skills and knowledge he had developed during a lifetime of civilian work. His understanding of heat, combustion, and chemical reactions, gained through years of professional cooking, became the foundation for a tactical innovation that changed the course of a battle and influenced military thinking for generations. The Battle of the Frying Pan also demonstrates the importance of fighting for something larger than yourself, of refusing to abandon those who depend on you even when the odds seem impossible. Benedetto's decision to stay and fight rather than flee came not from military training or patriotic ideology, but from a simple human commitment to the wounded soldiers who needed his protection. Stories like this remind us that heroism often comes in unexpected forms, that the most important innovations frequently emerge from the application of everyday knowledge to extraordinary circumstances, and that the difference between victory and defeat sometimes comes down to the willingness to use whatever tools are available rather than waiting for perfect weapons or ideal conditions. That's what we explore here. The moments when ordinary people discover extraordinary courage, when civilian skills become military assets, when the refusal to accept defeat leads to innovations that change the nature of warfare itself. If you believe these stories matter, if you want to understand the human dimension of military innovation and the power of improvisation under pressure, then subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell, because there are so many more stories like this one, waiting to be told with the respect and complexity they deserve. You won't want to miss what we discover next.